All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for the late start. Welcome to the City of San Carlos City Council successor agency to the redevelopment agency meeting. Would you please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any changes to the order of the agenda? Hearing none? All right. Greg, is there any report from closed session?
There's no report from closed session.
All right, thank you. Next is council communications. These are announcements or brief items that members of the City Council regarding upcoming events in the community and correspondence that they have received. They are informational in nature and no action will be taken on these items at this meeting. So why don't we start with, just to mix it up, Mark?
Something told me you were going to start over here this time.
I never
Thank
have.
you, Mr. Mayor. I know. Well, I appreciate that. Just one item in the interest of time. I attended the a board meeting of the South Bayside Waste Management Authority, basically the oversight board for our garbage and recycling services last week. They are moving forward with providing to all the member agencies the budget requirements for next year's garbage rates, which we should have shortly.
All right. Matt.
Two items. One, I just wanted to note that I did attend the American Cancer Society Relay for Life last Saturday at Carmont High School. I was impressed really at the number of young people, high school students, who committed themselves to walking for 24 hours. So they start in the morning and on Saturday at 10 and they go all the way till Sunday morning at 10. So they're out there, in the dark and so forth, keeping their teams going. But to see all those young people out there, I was given a chance to speak, and I commented about that they were out there, and they're not people who have had cancer or anything like that. They're just concerned and want to raise the money, so they were out there. And I also want to thank the mayor and Bob Grisilli for coming out and supporting that event. And then secondly, tomorrow the mayor and I will be at a fire board meeting for our I guess you can call it non-operational fire department, the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department that we had, and we still have financial responsibilities with that, and will for a number of years, and so that's why we have to have those kind of meetings still, and that's tomorrow at 11 o'clock at Belmont City Hall.
Great, thanks, Matt. Bob.
Mr. Mayor, I have nothing this evening.
Okay. Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two items. The first, if I could have you guys project that timeline. I attended a meeting of the San Mateo County Community Choice Energy Steering Committee. The county is moving very quickly with a proposal to create a countywide utility that would be called Peninsula Clean Energy, and it is the goal of this project is to allow consumer choice by creating an option for consumers to buy cleaner energy that would be brought to them via the PG&E infrastructure. I just wanted to make it clear to my colleagues that the county is asking us to vote on whether or not we would participate in this utility by January or February, and has asked us to have two additional meetings prior to that, a general update and then a public hearing about it. So the next step for the county is they're doing a technical study that'll look at the feasibility and look about how many greenhouse gases would be saved, would be prevented from being emitted, et cetera. So anyway, this is coming down the pike very quickly. The other update is that I attended a meeting of the 2+2 committee, which is a committee formed with 2 members of the City Council and 2 members of the school district. We got an update on the Four Corners study and a number of other issues. The one action item that came out of the meeting is, we talked jointly about the need in San Carlos for additional field space, and about how the school district and the city have an opportunity to work together on this. what was proposed is that we do a field inventory and some planning after the first of the year to look kind of jointly at the inventory for play fields on both school property and on city property. And so look for that to be coming soon. And that's it.
All right. Thanks, Cameron. I just had a few things. I didn't think I did anything, but then I started thinking about all the things that happened in the last couple of weeks. On the 16th, we dedicated Frank Harrington Park on Laurel Street. We had, I think there was about 100 people there. It was really a wonderful event, and a lot of people loved Frank very much. I called him the mayor of Laurel Street because he was always up and down Laurel, and I just was very grateful that so many people came out, and there was a lot of affection for him. A lot of people came up to me and told me a lot of different stories about him. His daughter was there, his granddaughters were there. My only wish is that we never had to name it for him because he'd still be with us. But anyway, it was a really nice event, and we've got a nice sign and a plaque down there at Downtown Park. Also on the same day, I had the opportunity to go to a luncheon for the Edgewood Center for Children and Families, and it's an organization that apparently has been around for 150 years, and they provide counseling to young people and also young adults up to the age of 25, which I found quite impressive. And they have an office here in San Carlos, and it was a pleasure to be able to be with them that day. And Matt mentioned I went to the Relay for Life. That was a great event, and I'm very proud of Matt for participating. A couple other things, not really council related, but I went to my first concert in the park this last Friday. Well attended. My wife's favorite band, the E-Ticket Band, was there, and it was a great job by our staff in putting that on, so my congrats to them. And then finally, the last non-council item is that yesterday, my wife and I celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary, so. I'm still here to talk about it.
Through the chair, I move that we issue her a proclamation for putting up with you for 40 years.
I think that's a pretty good idea. All right. And anyway, and if my wife's watching, Gail, thank you for 40 wonderful years, and may we have 40 more, although I don't even want to think how old we'll be by that point. Let's see, any comments by staff on city administrative business?
Just a few, Mr. Mayor. Next month, the city is going to be starting its $4.5 million parallel sanitary sewer project on Industrial, which will bring us about 85% of the way into compliance with our capacity assurance plan as part of our Baykeeper settlement. The fencing in City Hall Park for the off-leash dog areas will be going in beginning in August. National Night Out, which is being held on August 4th, starting at about 5 p.m. Police and fire personnel will have staff at both the Thornhill and Sunnydale block parties, and police plans to have its bomb squad, K-9 unit, robots, and SWAT armored vehicle on display. So not only will it be interesting, but it'll be incredibly safe at those block parties. And then finally, the Symphony at Sunset, the Park and Recreation Foundation's annual fundraiser with professionals from the San Francisco Symphony will take place at Burton Park on August 22nd.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Okay, we're now going to move on to public comment. Persons wishing to address the City Council on matters not on the posted agenda may do so at this time. Each speaker is limited to 2 minutes. If the item you're speaking on is not listed on the agenda, please be advised that the Council may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed as allowed under the Brown Act. The City Council's general policy is to refer items to staff for attention or have the matter placed on a future council agenda for more comprehensive action or a report and formal public discussion and input at that time. And I do have 2 slips, I believe, for items not on the agenda. The first one is Dimitri Vandelos. Are you here, Dimitri? There you are. Come on up.
Congratulations, Ron. It's impressive. I think I'm about a decade behind you. So if there's a proclamation for Ron, there better be a proclamation for me, for Gina to put up with me, quite frankly. A couple of things. I haven't had time to put together what I wanted to say, but I have a couple of rough notes. So I want to thank the city council and whoever was responsible for testing the PCBs on the hotel site. The land is more valuable because of that. We didn't find any. It's a win for everybody. So I think that's great. I don't think 205 units on that corner and the Transit Village and a construction in stereo is going to be good for our neighborhood, but I'm hoping we can have some discussions and minimize some of those impacts. And really what I want to discuss here is that the Loyola neighborhood has this hotel project, Transit Village project, Orchard Supply, which I don't believe has come up in front of council. But Orchard Supply is going to be built. The Windy Hill proposal that is larger than all of the combined commercial space that Redwood City is building is also impacting our neighborhood. And we are really looking, there are no mitigations for the community. And what we're looking for is to engage in dialogue and discussion to figure out what kind of mitigations we can have to reduce the impacts, cul-de-sacing streets, other things, maybe generating some of the funds that are coming from these projects to beautify and improve the Loyola neighborhood. Those would all be welcome. There's just there are too many items on the agenda for someone who's employed to do all of the due diligence that's necessary. And the one last thing I wanted to bring up is I brought this up in the Planning Commission as they were considering the hotel project, and I think it's very important for council to understand this as well. In the packet that was delivered, there was more data on a single-family home than there was on the 205-unit hotel project. And there was a significant amount of discussion. I think the Planning Commission actually did a very good job in going over the issues. So kudos to them. But our priorities are out of whack when a single-family home takes up over half of an agenda packet and the largest development in San Carlos is less. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitri. Priya Joseph?
Congratulations. So we are at the anniversary of Ordinance 1470, which you did on Holly Street. We're eagerly awaiting to see what you will do the next month. We're waiting for the study that's actually going to be done. I wanted to talk about 3 items. Road rage, it's been a repeated issue every week. There's at least 2 occurrences where residents are not able to move into their driveways. You didn't address that in your recommendations. The second thing is I've sent videos to some of you on the right lanes. It's really dangerous. I strongly advise you try to walk. Just walk once, right? And you will understand how dangerous it is. If you stretch your right arm, there's no clearance. So, when you walk dogs, kids, pregnant women, it's just dangerous. So that is the second item. And the third item, I'll just wait to see enforcement. So there is no enforcement. There's no speed reduction, recommendation from you guys. You should look at that. So these are the 3 items. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on any item not on the agenda tonight? Okay. All right. All right, now we're going to move on to the approval of the consent calendar. The consent calendar items are considered to be routine and will be enacted in one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a member of the council, the staff, or the public request specific items to be removed for separate action. And I do have, by the way, I actually have two people that want to speak on, actually I have more than two that want to talk about the 7I, so maybe we just ought to pull that. And also, I've got one person who wants to speak on 7H. Yeah, I think, I have lots on 7I, so consider that pulled. And I think, so we need a motion for everything else but 7I and
I'm sorry.
H, yes.
Let's include J in that. I wanted to.
Okay, and
Yeah.
J?
Yeah.
All right. All right, 7.
So, Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to...
Mr. Mayor,
I'm
excuse
sorry.
me, I'd actually like to also remove 7K, please.
I, H, J, and K, is that right? Or H, I, J, and K? Getting the alphabet correct. Okay. All right. Go
Mr.
ahead,
Mayor, I make a motion to approve the consent calendar items A through G and L through N.
Second.
All right. Yvette, please call the roll.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes?
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Olbert?
Yes.
Mayor Collins?
Yes. Okay, so why don't we just get right into it. We have, the first speaker I have is on, let's see, we want to make sure we go in alphabetical order, so the first one is 7H. That would be Paul Maginetti. Did we lose Paul? Oh, there you are. Sorry, Paul.
Mr. Mayor, do you need a motion and a second on this item?
We will after.
I think yes, after.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, gentlemen. Dimitri stole my thunder, but having data is definitive and good to have. I want to talk about the dredging along Belmont Creek. Without a doubt, there are PCBs in that mud. The way that PCBs travel is they don't soak deep in the ground. They stay on the surface. They cling to the dust. It gets blown into the storm drains and into the creeks and in there. It's an archaeological site. And if you do this smart and you take core samples along the creek, you will know where and when those PCBs were deposited, and you will be able to find out who is responsible for allowing those PCBs into the environment. And the obvious characters are the Delta Star site, of course, and there's Teagle property there. Interestingly, PG&E has never reported a spill of any kind on their land. I don't quite know what to make of it, but anyway, if you were to spend the money wisely, I would advise you to measure core samples, test for them in depth. If you have no PCBs at the very surface, that's great, because that means it's no longer coming off the property. If they are, you'll be able to tell where they're coming from. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Paul. Next is Betsy Kofed.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. We are moving on to 7I, because unless anyone else would like to speak on 7H?
We need a resolution.
What's that? Okay. Dimitri, can you hang on just a second, because we need a... All right. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
I just want to reiterate Mr. Maginetti's comments. I noticed in the packet that only about 30K was devoted to testing for PCBs, which is really inadequate for dredging of the creek. And I strongly encourage council to consider doing specifically what Mr. Maginetti was referring to, and not just doing one set of sample data. I think it's important to do it along different areas of the creek. So it would be a very pragmatic and practical approach to do more testing figure out who the responsible parties are and see if the responsible parties could actually do the cleanup if we find that there are problems, as opposed to the citizens of San Carlos.
All right, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on item 7H?
Mr. Mayor?
We have one more. Hang on.
Thank you. I actually sent an email around this. I didn't say anything about, how will you reroute traffic? It's around Holly. There's nothing about that in the package. And then I also had questions around the environmental impact. It seems like there are different ways in which you do. If you're doing the sediment removal in situ, etc., there are different things. Is there environmental impact? I didn't see anything around that. I didn't see a response. So would like to see more around that before you decide to adopt the ordinance. So,
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak on item 7H? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt a resolution approving the plans and specifications for the Holly 101 East-West Channel and Belmont Creek Sediment Removal Project C9828 and authorize the city manager to execute a construction contract with Innovative Construction Solutions.
Second.
Second. All right.
There's also an authorization for expenditures.
What is that?
Oh, and authorizing.
Sorry, I missed that. And authorizing the expenditure of a construction budget with contingencies in the amount of $1,731,000.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? Yvette, go ahead.
Councilmember Grossilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Olbert?
Yes.
Mayor Collins?
Yes. Okay, now we will move on to item 7I, and now Betsy Kofed. Sorry for the false alarm there.
Mr. Mayor, this is the item where I have a conflict due to the location of my residence, so I'll step down and out of the room for a
All
moment.
right, Betsy, can you hang on just a second while Mr. Rubens exits the room? Betsy, hang on just a second. The Vice Mayor just pointed out to me that might be a good idea to announce what 7I is so people know what was being spoken about.
Just don't turn the clock on yet. my time.
All right. No, I will. You'll get your full 2 minutes. This is to adopt Ordinance 1493, ordering the submission of a proposition of incurring bonded debt to the qualified voters of the City of San Carlos at the general municipal election to be held on November 3rd, 2015, for the purpose of the acquisition and improvement of the Black Mountain properties as a public park.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council members, and my fellow citizens. I cannot tell you how awkward it is for me to stand here and take this particular stance on this item. I'm a Girl Scout. I love open space. But this is not particularly about open space. What it's about is in the indebtedness that the bond puts upon the citizens of San Carlos without any plan or specific plan about what it's for. When this afternoon I was on the Nextdoor website, and there were 177 comments on Black Mountain alone. And most of them were pointing out, quite specifically and very logically, the cost implications that it will make. I'm a business owner in San Mateo County for over 30 years, and I know that when you look at a budget and when you see something, this land will cost $1.5 million per acre. Open space, a lot of people have said, why don't we get open space involved and they can buy it? They wouldn't even look at anything for more than $25,000 an acre. This is an outrageous expenditure without us even knowing what the plan is. Because some people say, oh good, we'll get another sports field. And then the swimming pool people said, no, we want a swimming pool. Open space and hikers say, oh, you better not do that. We want it to stay open space. So there's a lot of controversy about what it will be, not only to mention, once it's purchased, the cost of doing what it is that we don't know that we're doing, How do we do that, and how do we maintain the property? So I think at this point, I mean, it's easy for you to sit there and say, we should put it to the voters, let the voters decide. But I think as our responsible leaders in this community, it's irresponsible to even put it to the voters because the cost is just too high. Thank you.
Betsy. Next is Bill Kofed.
For those of you that don't know, that was my wife. And as usual, I don't have nearly as much to say.
How many years have you been married?
Actually, 51. Yes.
Good luck on 52.
Yeah, it may not happen, but yeah. I'd just like to keep this really simple and straight. As a business owner for over 40 years, I've wanted to take on projects a lot of different times, a lot of different projects. And many of those projects, I had to go talk to my friendly bankers. And my friendly bankers usually wanted to know everything. They wanted to know how I was going to get this money back, how I was going to pay them back. They wanted to know everything that was going to go on before they would ever think about loaning me the money. In the case of Black Mountain, it seems that we're trying to do a vast project without really knowing what the plans are and what the costs are. And, I think maybe my point would be that you should look at us as your banker and have everything there so that we can see exactly what's going to happen before you ask us to go ahead with the project. When I bought this house in San Carlos in 1976, we were young, very young, and we had such there was nothing that our bank didn't know about us before we moved in here. And I would kind of like to have you think of us as that young kid that wants to buy the house in San Carlos, because he really loves living here in San Carlos and loves the everything about this city is wonderful. And I would just hate to see us make a huge mistake without really knowing, make a huge mistake. So we really need to know everything that we want to do with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, next up is Alfred Kirk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. I have to cut this shorter than I had intended, okay? I'm concerned about the bloated price tag with almost $30 million in discretionary spending to pay off the developers and make some site improvements. No cost-specific figures and secret negotiations with no taxpayer input or oversight. This is playing fast and loose with public money, and temptations abound for cozy deals and other shenanigans. Which brings me to the brutally unfair proposal to pay for the bond using a tax rate based on a property assessed value and with no senior exemption. That would mean that some property owners would be facing a bond bill of $20 or $40, while others had to pony up $400 or $500 or more, while their votes counted equally. In other words, voters would not be voting for the same outcome. That's not an honest vote. A ballot can only be honest, fair, and legitimate when consequences are equivalent. It brings up the possible conflict of interest on the counsel's part. By pursuing this project and by selecting this method of payment over other more fair possibilities.
Mr. Kirk, if you could wrap it up, please.
I'm sorry?
I said if you could wrap it up, please. It's been 2 minutes, so.
I'm all done?
Thank you.
Sorry, I can't hear.
Oh, sorry. You're all done?
No.
Oh, well, what I said was you had 2 minutes, and your 2 minutes is up.
Okay.
Okay. I would normally let you go a little bit longer, but we have lots of people that want to talk
I come in
tonight.
at the end. I've just got a little bit more to go.
All right. Another
Okay.
15 seconds or so.
The San Carlos taxpayers, in addition to the normal property taxes, are already burdened with paying off 4 existing bond issues. What we don't need is another bond, especially one that is deeply flawed and with questionable credentials. What we do need and deserve is a city manager committed to living within the city's means. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Wade Kingery.
I have similar concerns to what you've already heard. I think the price of this property is exorbitant for open space, and there's a lot of confusion about what this land would actually be used for in the long run. Is it going to be used for an actual open space park? If so, it'll be the most expensive one on the peninsula for sure, and it's quite small. You can walk across it in 10 minutes. So when we've got thousands of acres of open space county land surrounding our city, it doesn't make sense to me to spend that kind of money on this tiny little open space that will require quite a bit of work. There's lots of buildings on there, structures, houses, construction debris that need to be removed, trails, reforestation, parking. None of that's included in this proposition, so no one knows what the cost really is. I think it's up to the council to make that clear on the ballot. I think the voters need to know what the real costs are and what the real goal of this is. Some people think it's going to be a pool or a school or a playing field. If it's a playing field, it's going to be a $45 million playing field because a lot of dirt's going to have to be moved. It'll be the most expensive playing field in the country for Little League, I think. So it just doesn't make sense to me financially, and I think it's really important the voters get a clear picture of what they're voting for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kingery. Next is Christine Pitt.
Hello, Mayor and council members. I just want to say that I concur with Betsy, her husband, this gentleman who spoke. I think the price tag on this property is totally outrageous. There are beautiful dresses that I see at Macy's I would love to buy. They fit perfectly. But it's not in my budget, so I don't buy it. We don't know the maintenance costs, so I just totally disagree with the bond issue. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. All right, next we have Priya Joseph.
I love open spaces, but this is, one of those things where it's cart before horse. It's one more example of where you haven't thought through, you haven't, laid out what your agenda is, right? And I've asked repeatedly, what's the verbiage going to be? If you have excess funds, what is it going to be used for, right? All that has to be nailed. You just have to find a different funding vehicle to do this. I would also like to say this is one more example which, sort of elucidates why you need a sunshine ordinance in the city of San Carlos. So consider that.
Thank you, Priya. All right, next we have Bob Daner.
Good evening. I'm Bob Daner. I've been in San Carlos for some 45 years. That doesn't give me any special privileges, but it allows me to say I've seen a lot happen in San Carlos. And I've watched as previous city councils and school boards have passed on potential parkland. Our Site 8, Site 10, the Loyola School site, the remainder of the San Carlos High School site. And I've ever watched as my favorite park, Crestview, took years to become fully developed. Now, Black Mountain is the last open space in San Carlos that could be ever used as a park. And I'm confident that when Black Mountain Park is fully developed, it will be a jewel and an asset to our community, and people will wonder how we ever got along without it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. All right, next we have Linda Matos.
Mayor, council members, I'm here again. I was just curious as to why all of us that are on kind of a wishy-washy side, why does this feel like this is a no-win situation? We either get 100 houses or we get taxed. So why am I feeling like this is a no-win situation? Why are we having a burden on the taxpayers to carry this? Is there not a way we can find a compromise? Can we not get the owners that are selling this to the table and have somebody out here do due diligence and ask these people if there's a way we can get a developer in who will not only put in responsible, reasonable, respectable housing, but also put in that park that people think they want? Can't we have a 50-50 here? A park that would be developed that I don't know who would maintain the park. Again, I'm new to all this, I don't really know, but we could get the park and the homes. It would be a low-maintenance park. Somebody else would have to pay for keeping it up. And somewhere along the line, somebody can decide what kind of park this would be. Dog trails, hiking trails, just a swing set and a piece of grass. But the developer would have to be the one that have to put it in, not me. I wouldn't have to pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. All right, next we have Dr. Charlene Edinburgh.
Good evening, gentlemen. I last spoke with you last year when there was a lot of to-do regarding North Crestview Park, and I'm surprised I'm here again, but now I'm beginning to think I need to join the city council to become involved with all that goes on here. I was quite surprised suddenly in my mailbox to find multiple fancy glossy mailers that looked a great deal like the bond advertisement from the Mid-Peninsula Open Space last year regarding this bond issue. And I wondered who paid for that. And of course the answer is apparently my tax money has paid for those mailers to find out what my opinion is of the potential bond issue. I agree with most of the other speakers. I think this is an extremely expensive proposition that is tiered strangely based on how long one has owned property here. I'm a native of San Carlos, so one of the properties I'm responsible for would not be highly taxed in this. My more recent purchase would be more highly taxed. I wonder about landlords passing on this tax, because basically this bond would be the same as a tax, onto their renters and the impact on future renters in San Carlos. So for a variety of reasons and for a variety of questions I have, including who has paid for all this mailing and very strange survey taking and so on, I'm opposed to this bond measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Edinburgh. Next, we have Laura Larkin.
Good evening. I just briefly want to say that with the poll that was taken and 64% of the people wanting the Black Mountain property to stay undeveloped and another, 7 or 9% undecided, whatever way people see it, I think the citizens of San Carlos need to be able to vote on what happens to the property. Once the space is developed, it's developed. And I've been a resident of San Carlos 26 years. I've seen lots and lots of changes. I hate to be a NIMBY kind of person, but one of the things I really enjoyed about San Carlos is the open space and the trees, and whether it's 50 houses or 100 houses, the developer pretty much can decide however they want to develop that property. So I would just urge you to adopt Ordinance 1493 and allow the voters to have their say. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next is David Ligori.
Hi, thank you. I too am a business owner. I own several businesses, in fact. And one of my most important responsibilities is to be able to assess long-term value propositions. And so I look at this a little bit differently than maybe some other people. So where others see this as a major expenditure, I see it as an acquisition of a long-term value asset. And I think your responsibility and the council is to add value to the community, and things like really good schools and parks and open spaces add value. Jeff mentioned a $4.5 million sewer improvement or repair project. I'm pretty sure when that's done, people aren't going to clamor to San Carlos to live here because we have good sewers, right? But they will come here because we have good open spaces and parks and schools. And so I look at the $170 a year extra that I would pay, which is about $5,500 over 30 years. And I think about the value that we added to my property as well as everyone else's property over that time period. And I feel it's a pretty big net positive for me and for the community. And so my perspective is this is a good thing for our community. I looked at my tax records the other day. The value of my property, if it was an acre, if I extrapolate that, is about $3.5 million. So if we're paying $1.5 million per acre for this property, I think we're getting a pretty good deal. It's a totally apples to oranges comparison to compare it to Peninsula open space properties. Totally different. This is in the heart of a vibrant downtown community. All right, so it's not a fair comparison. So I urge you to adopt this amendment and put it to a vote. The people of San Carlos are intelligent. They'll make a good decision. Thank you.
All right, thank you, David. All right, next is Matt Coet.
Hello, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Matt Coet, and apparently I'm a relatively newcomer here, only a 17-year resident in San Carlos. I'm speaking tonight in support of the ordinance to put a bond in front of the voters to acquire Black Mountain. I have just two short comments about the proposal itself. The first is this is the last large piece of land that could potentially be used as a park and public space. And as the old saying about land goes, they're not making any more of it. This is a really, I don't know if it's a unique opportunity to San Carlos, but I think it's our last opportunity to acquire this scope of land. And such an important question for the future of San Carlos, really for generations, absolutely needs to be put to the voters. And so I urge the council to adopt the ordinance and put the item onto the November ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. All right, and next is Mary Farrell.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I'm also speaking against the bond proposal. And the reason I am is because I do believe that open space is very, very important. And I'm an avid hiker in this area. I can tell you that within about 4 or 5 miles from here, we have at least a dozen trails and open spaces with parking and all available or most available amenities. And so why do we need to spend $18 million to build another one. We are not like a super dense city where we do not have enough space. We have trees, we have parks, and most of the people do not even use them. So I am adamantly opposed to this, and the reason I am is because it is not well thought out. There's no plan for what it is for. There are many parks already, and very few people use them, as I've said. Burton Park is used an awful lot, and it should be, because it is for the community. And that is what this proposal is for as well. And that park is being used very, very well, and there's additions to it, and there are opportunities for people to participate in community activities there. And I think it's a wonderful thing that the city has done. The cost of the development is unknown. It is a very, very premature decision, and the cost of the maintenance is unknown. And I agree with this woman here, this young woman who has lived here, who spoke first, and she said, look at us as your banker. We have given you our list of the documents we need. You need to perform on that with accountability and responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Is there anyone else who did not turn in a card that wishes to come up at this time and speak? Okay, seeing none, I think... Oh, I apologize. Come on up.
Council, Andrew Taylor, Crestview Drive. I'm also here just to express my opposition to this. I think anything that is usually bond measures that come forward that don't have a plan, you ask the voters for a lot of money like this and they just say no. And even if this gets passed, you're then going to be put in the position where we're going to have another huge fight between members of the community. We're going to be stuck with that property because you're going to have one group of people that are expecting, if the land is acquired, expecting to be open space. You're going to have another group expecting sports fields and swimming pools. And a lot of people are going to be upset by this. So I think it's very premature at this time. The cost is prohibitive. You can talk to the Nature Conservancy, Post, Mid-Penn, any of the major conservancy organizations, even cities. I work for Open Space, and I've been talking to finance managers up and down the peninsula. They just look at this and they shake their head. They say $1 million, north of $1 million an acre for park space. It's ludicrous. Everybody would like to have it, but not at that price. And when you consider that the Open Space District has accumulated over 42 years, 62,000 acres of land at a cost of $5,000 an acre, and here we're talking about paying anywhere from 1.2 to 1.4, depending on whose numbers you believe these days. I would say if you want to bring this to the voters, go back, get the plan. You've had the time. Everybody says, well, we don't have the time. You've been working on this since July. And I'd like to know why none of this has been as in parallel, why there has not been a plan to figure out what to do with the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. All right. Anyone else like to speak? Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I move to adopt Ordinance 1493, ordering the submission of a proposition of incurring bonded debt to the qualified voters of the City of San Carlos at the general municipal election to be held on November 3rd, 2015, for the purposes of the acquisition and improvements of the Black Mountain properties as a public park.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. I think there may be some discussion to have on this. Let's start. Oh, hang on a minute. Matt, go ahead.
Thank you. First point I'd like to make is for myself, when we voted to introduce the ordinance, I voted for it, and I'm going to vote for it again tonight, primarily because I'm on the fence. And when you're on the fence on something, you can't lead on it. Now, that might be surprising for someone who's a politician to say, I'm not going to lead on an issue, right? You're expected to lead, but I can't because I'm on the fence. And so when you're in that position, I feel the best thing to do is to give it to the voters. Number two, when I walked in here tonight, I thought, my gosh, what's the issue we have on the agenda that's brought all these people out? Well, I see what it is, and it's fantastic. This is how it's supposed to work. And somebody said, about the community fighting. I don't really look at it as fighting, but yes, debating and trying to make a decision on an issue. You always hear from me that we're a republic, but the way we also work as a republic sometimes is you give things to the voters to make a decision, and then of course you're acting more like a democracy, which people always say that we are. But when you go that route, it's dirty. People get muddy, and pun intended, I guess, and that's the way it should work sometime. And I think in this case, that's the way it should work. I wanted to just quickly clear up a few issues. People said, well, we should have a plan. Well, we could have done that. But then that would be the council deciding what kind of park you're going to have, and then saying, this is it. We're presenting it to you. Do you want to buy this, Chevrolet Impala with 4 doors on it, or not? And that's not the approach we're taking. What we're doing is we're saying maximum number of dollars. And yes, it also mentions a maximum interest rate, which would be, you business guys can figure that out. That's a lot of money when you go out that many years. It is. It's just like, but look at how you bought your house. You paid for your house 3-4 times over just because you're paying the bank interest for 30 years. But the city manager has told us we're not going to spend necessarily $45 million. When you do a bond, that's a maximum, and then we're going to do public hearings, and then you get to decide what kind of park we're going to have. And yes, there are going to be people who say, well, we want a pool, or we want a sports field, or whatever. In my mind, when I look at it as a park, I don't see a pool, and I don't see any sports field. I see something more like Arguello Park without the baseball field. That's what I see. But that's for the community to decide. And then when it's decided, then you release the bond money as you have your expenses. And each time you have to kind of go, by having these public hearings on what the park is going to be like, it's kind of like going back to the bank and saying, this is what we want to do, and this is what it's going to cost. That's when those things are going to be fleshed out, and you will know. So I very much do want to put this on the ballot, and I do very much look forward to seeing the community debate the issue and decide what they want to have.
Thank you, Matt. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make a couple of comments based on some of the observations that I heard made by speakers tonight. First off, there was one gentleman early on who talked about how it was unfortunate that there wasn't a senior exemption being offered for the bond. And I just want folks to know that California law actually does not allow, on a straightforward basis, for a senior exemption for bonds. It does for parcel taxes, which is why most parcel taxes are granted that kind of exemption, because we understand that people living on fixed incomes, it's a challenge for them. But I also want folks to know that we spent a fair amount of time, we meaning the bond subcommittee that Cameron and I are on, we spent a fair amount of time working with a number of legal and financial experts because we thought we had found a way to actually create something like a senior exemption. Unfortunately, what we found is that we had created something that apparently nobody else in the entire state of California had ever thought of, which means that it's something that theoretically could work, but there's no precedent for it. And so that's a fairly risky thing to do, and the last thing we want to do is expose somebody to thinking they have an exemption and then find out they don't. So that's why you will see that in the bond measure. There are some other things, however, that you will see in the bond measure that I want to make sure folks are aware of. The money has to be spent and can only be spent on those particular parcels. They're actually identified by parcel number. So the money can't be diverted to even some other park use in San Carlos. Can't use it to modify Burton Park. Can't use it to expand or improve Loyola Park, what have you. It has to be spent only at Black Mountain. Matt mentioned that the design of the park we deliberately decided not to try and have the council and a small group of people come up with the design and then say, how do you guys feel about that? The plan is to have an open public process with either through the Parks and Rec Commission or an independently appointed Citizens Advisory Commission to actually hold hearings and come up with a design for the park. Similarly, there's also in the bond language, there is a requirement that there be an independent spending oversight committee, basically of citizens who would volunteer and would be appointed to make sure that no money is spent other than what the bond measure actually allows for. That's a technique that has been used very successfully for many years in many school districts, and it's something that the council embraced and thinks is a good idea, and I certainly think it's a good idea. So those only address a small number of the comments that were made by some individuals. Further to Matt's point, there will be an opportunity, assuming the council acts to put this before voters, for voters to learn about this and make up their own minds. And the most important point to me was a comment that a gentleman made at the end of his remarks. I trust the voters of San Carlos. They're smart people. They'll figure things out, and they'll make the decision that's right for them collectively. That I have absolutely no doubt about that whatsoever. So anyway, Mr. Mayor, thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sort of echoing what my colleague said, especially Mr. Grocott. For Mr. Grocott and I to agree on things, it doesn't happen very often, but happens enough. As was mentioned, this is a bond issue up to $45 million. It's an authorization. It's not a blank check. My colleague, Mr. Olbert, indicated again the independent commission of citizens that will oversee the costs of it and where all the money goes. As Mr. Grocott said, purposely done to be blank because that way the five of us weren't going to decide to have a pool and everybody didn't want one, but we want one. So that's why it would happen. That isn't going to happen that way. We want to make sure we get input. The cost, Mr. Liguori, I think, indicated some of the thoughts. This is a time. I've been here 32 years. Some people have been here longer. Some people less. This is the last parcel in San Carlos. There won't be any more open space like this. I think we felt that it was an opportunity if the citizens felt that they wanted to keep that open space. If they didn't, that's fine too. That's why I think an election is a good idea. To get 2/3, and my colleague Mr. Olbert can attest to this on the school board, is a struggle. They've been very successful, but it's been tight, everyone, at least the ones that I've seen. So it's not a 50% plus one. It's a matter of if the citizens want to have this as an open space type situation, they can have it. There's no rule that says there's going to be 100 houses or 50 houses or 20 houses or whatever. It is zoned for housing, however. So the owners could theoretically, they haven't in the 32 years that I've been here, designated it for housing, but they may decide to do it or sell it to someone else. We have an opportunity. I think sometimes you have to take the shot and take the opportunity. And again, we're not spending any money unless it's authorized by the voters. So I'll be supporting this ordinance this evening.
Thank you, Bob. Cameron.
So I want to thank all the speakers who came out and spoke tonight, and I agree with most of what my colleagues have said. I thought Matt put it well when he said, this is what it's all about. People can come and they can agree or disagree. But I did want to just remind folks a little bit of the context and how we got to where we are. So, there were a couple comments about fiscal responsibility. If you go back 6-7 years ago, coming off of the Great Recession, the city was in pretty bad financial shape. And we made a lot of deep cuts. We laid off workers, we outsourced services, we completely reconfigured public safety services. And, at that time, the entire focus of the city was, how do we restore fiscal stability? How do we, kind of get our financial house in order? And now, because we took all that action, it was actually folks on the council way before I joined took that action, we get to a place where the city is actually in great financial shape. And, the economy has come back in a great way. Home values in San Carlos are up. And so we all sit here and we say, well, the city's financial situation is humming along, and we then start to focus not on, protecting the day-to-day operations of the city. We start to look for new opportunities. How can we make the city better? I mean, that's why we all ran for city council. We want to make the city a better place. And so rather than focus on one specific item or say, this is my best idea, we went out and we did this incredibly transparent public process that started right around the first of the year, where we had a series of public meetings. And we offered up 12 different options. And we said, you tell us, if we were going to make a big capital investment in San Carlos this year, what should we do? And we had public forums. We did surveys, we did online research, we had thousands of people participate. And I can tell you, when I was sitting here in January, Black Mountain was not the top of my list. I had actually not really heard of Black Mountain. But, when I saw the feedback come back from the forums, and Black Mountain jumped to the top of the list, and then I got an opportunity to take a tour, I really understood why people were excited about this property and why it represents a huge opportunity for our community. This is not a necessity. This is not, if we don't do this, San Carlos will become a bad place or anything. This is all about upside. This is all about opportunity. This is all about improving our community. And these opportunities don't come along. It's really ultimately, for me, a question about community values. You've got one hillside, it's sort of the last undeveloped parcel. Would you like it to be developed as a new neighborhood, or would you like it to be preserved and turned into something special? I understand when people say there's no plan. I mean, it's a complete, I completely understand where you're coming from. I can tell you, I'm not going to reiterate exactly what my colleague said, but the plan is to buy the land. That's really the plan, and then to have a public process to create a park. I think when people say, well, what's the park going to be, what's it going to look like, they envision a fully formed park that's going to sort of be there on day one. And that's not really how these things go. If you think about the improvements that we just made to Burton Park in the last couple of years, we added bocce ball courts, we added a stage, and those were community benefits that became apparent after many, many, many decades of having that park there. First there was a lawn, people started having concerts, and then we said, well, let's put a stage there. And now, Ron talked about how he went to the concert in the park, and we have a beautiful stage where we can have music in the park, and that's a great opportunity. Those kinds of capabilities will become available if we have land. And we can build them into Black Mountain Park over the next 5 years, over the next 5 decades, over the next century. And it's really about, do you want to have that opportunity? Do you want to have that canvas to create recreational outdoor activities for the community? So I think this is a huge, huge opportunity. I want to thank those of you who support it, those of you who don't, everyone who's come and participated in the process. It's going to be a great public dialogue over the next couple months, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the outcome is.
Thank you, Cameron. Well, a lot of great comments, and I don't want to belabor them, but when I ran for council 4 years ago, people said, why do you want to do this? And I said, because I like participating in direct democracy. I get to make decisions in front of the people that are going to be affected by those decisions. I'm not up in Sacramento or in Washington or something like that. This is the purest form of democracy that I know. People get to participate in this process on a regular basis, twice a month. I have a deep respect for everybody that showed up tonight. There's a lot of people at home that didn't care enough to come down here. So whether you were for or against this issue, thank you for coming and just giving us your opinion. Because even if it's an opinion that we may not necessarily agree with, it's useful and it's helpful down the line. But this is a process, this is a democratic process that I just don't understand if somebody says, I don't want the democratic process to go on. We've had survey after survey, and so many people participated, an 86% recognition level of the issue. Over 65% of the people have said, we want to vote on this. And as I said to someone who sent me an email today, even if it's wrong, even if it's off by 5%, even if it's off by 10%, how do I explain to 55 or 60% of the people in this town that I didn't want to give them a chance to decide the future of this land? As my fellow council member said, this has been a 7-month-long process. We just didn't wake up last week and figure out that we were going to do this. This has been a process that's been going on. Somebody asked, well, why don't you let the schools buy it? Well, the San Carlos Elementary School District looked at it over a year ago and said, we're not interested. The Sequoia Union High School District looked at the property and said, we're not interested. So there have been other entities that have been interested in this land, and they have decided that they didn't want it. An email writer said, why don't you bring back Scoot? Well, I had to remind her that, guess what? You know why Scoot isn't here today? It's because there was a vote by the people of this town who decided that they didn't want Scoot. That the prior council trusted the voters of this town enough to say, we're going to find out if you want this. There were, I think I have 2 council members to my right who can remind me if I'm wrong, but I believe we had 3 other measures that were put before the voters. We had a couple of fire measures that failed. We had what was the other one? A sales tax that failed. Those of you around in 1990 remember ProRec. I worked on that. It failed miserably. Actually, at that time, the council could have just passed a utility tax. But there were people on that committee that said, we want to vote. We want to find out how the people of this town feel. Well, we found out all right. It wasn't pretty, and it was very embarrassing. But what I found is that we hadn't done our homework. We hadn't done enough planning. And we've had a lot of input on this project. We've had a lot of people talking about it. So I just feel it's not my place to decide for the people of this town whether or not this property is purchased. If it doesn't pass, okay, I can live with that. We can all live with it. But I don't want to say 10 years from now, even 5 years from now, when somebody comes up to me and says, why didn't you get the Black Mountain property when you could have? I don't want to say to them, well, I didn't think you'd vote for it, so I didn't put it on the ballot. I'm sorry, I just couldn't live with myself if I did that. The last thing I want to say to those who are opposed, you have the lowest bar to get over. You only need to get 1 out of every 3 voters to say no. If 1 out of 3 says no, this thing doesn't pass. The people who want this need 2 out of 3 in order for this thing to go forward. So just to close, I, again, trust all of you. I trust the people of this town, the town that raised me, the town that raised my children and my wife, the town where my mother died in and my mother-in-law still lives here. I trust all of those people. I trust all of you. Okay, enough of that. I think, Mark, you had a comment you wanted to make?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, I wanted to make a motion.
Okay.
You already
Go for it.
made the motion.
I think we did make a motion.
Oh, I thought we just read it. I didn't know we had made did we? We did?
Had a motion and a second?
Yep.
Well, that's what happens.
All right, any other discussion? All right, Yvette, please call the roll.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Olbert?
Yes.
Mayor Collins?
Yes. Okay, I think the next we had also item 7J, correct? Adopt ordinance 1494 amending municipal code title 15 buildings and construction to provide an expedited streamlined permitting process for small residential rooftop solar systems.
Mr. Mayor, I pulled
that was you, Matt?
Yeah, I pulled it because I voted no on it before, and so need to do that again.
Okay.
That's it.
Mr. Mayor, do you need a motion on this one?
I believe we do. Yes, we do.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council adopt ordinance number 1494, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos amending Municipal Code Title 15, Buildings and Construction, to provide an expedited, streamlined permitting process for small residential rooftop solar systems.
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Yvette, please call the roll.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Olbert?
Yes.
Mayor Collins?
Yes. All right, next we have item 7K. I believe that was pulled as well.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I pulled that because I voted no on that one, and I would like the opportunity to vote no on it again.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt Ordinance 1495, amending San Carlos Municipal Code, Chapter 12.12.260, regulation of park facilities, smoking.
Second.
All right, motion and second. Any other discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just a quick process question that perhaps Mr. Rubens can answer. Greg, I think it was at the SBWMA meeting, they used a procedure where if all one was doing was voting against a consent item agenda, they just registered it you sort of said, I'm voting on the entire consent item, consent agenda except items X and Y. Is that allowed under law? If so, it might save us some time.
That is allowed under law. We have in the past done that, but it hasn't been consistent. But council members can express that they're voting in favor of the consent calendar, except the items that they don't want to vote for. They could say that they don't.
So like this one, I wouldn't have had to pull it. I could have just voted on it and vote.
That's
okay.
the alternate method.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Yvette?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson? Councilmember Olbert?
No.
Mayor Collins?
Yes. Okay, next we are moving on to, assuming we did all of those items, which I think we did, moving on to a public hearing, consideration of a resolution certifying the final environmental impact report and adopting the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. And that this is now consideration of resolution approving and authorizing the city manager to execute the disposition and development agreement between the City of San Carlos and Olson Real Estate Group, Inc. for the Landmark Hotel project at 595 Industrial Road, 850 East San Carlos Avenue, and 810 East San Carlos Avenue. Al.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. Tonight, the way we've organized the presentation is I'll start off with some background on the project and how we got to where we are today. Then we'll have Artie Olson talk about, give an overview of the project and the architectural design. Lisa Costa-Sanders, our principal planner, will talk about the entitlements and the EIR. And then finally, we'll have Jim Simon with RSG talk about the disposition and development agreement, and I'll close it out with a recommendation. I don't have the...
Hey, you're good.
As you can see from the screen, we have over a dozen professionals, experts in various fields to answer questions of the City Council or the public. We even have a former staff member here, Mark Sawicki, who was our Economic Development and Housing Manager all the way from Oakland that came to see the public hearing. But rather than have these folks give a presentation, we thought that we would pick on the person who is the most expert in the field, whatever the question is that comes up. So I'll try and orchestrate those questions as they arise with the folks in the audience. In terms of the history, the Landmark site has for many years been considered a prime location for regional serving, commercial and hospitality uses, which would contribute to the city's financial viability and implement the city's economic development plan and objectives. And you can see that all the way back in the early 90s, it was identified in various plans in the city. In 2014, the city acquired 3 properties to start assemblage at the Landmark site for this type of use. We went out to the marketplace and selected R.D. Olson to be a partner with the City of San Carlos to build the hotel. A number of community meetings were conducted with the greater East San Carlos neighborhood as well. In 2014, we also released the EIR, we got public comment, and we had 2 public hearings with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission made a number of decisions at their last meeting, and they're making a recommendation to you this evening as well on the environmental impact report. And then finally, we're here before you for your consideration of the environmental impact report and the development agreement. In terms of the site location, as you know, these are the 3 parcels that were purchased by the city of San Carlos, and these are the ones we're talking about tonight there on the screen in red. However, you also know that there are 5 total properties in the landmark site there, and these properties were zoned by the city for landmark status in terms of zoning because the city wanted any new use to be consistent with the long-term economic development and land use goals of the city. But why development? Why a hotel development at this site? Well, hotel development on the site, as noted, has long been sought by the city as a means to increase diversity in the general fund revenues. It would also have significant benefits for employment growth and continue to help our economic sustainability in our community. And it would also be an amenity for our local businesses and a place for our community to gather and host out-of-town guests. Conservatively, this size of a hotel would bring in about $1 million plus per year to the city's general fund, and it presents an opportunity for the city to realize its long-term land use goals and economic development goals for the area. In terms of the development plan or the program, it's an extended stay hotel, and Artie Olson will talk to you about what that means. 204 rooms. There's some on-site amenities for the guests, of course, and there's a meeting room, and the grounds are available for public use. There would be a new traffic light and crosswalk at each San Carlos and Industrial. They are proposing 136 new trees on site and landscaping, and the number of trees far exceeds the city's zoning requirements. There are also some neighborhood improvements that are on the board for new trees and landscaping on the west side of Industrial as requested by the greater East San Carlos neighborhood. And so with that, I'm going to introduce R.D. Olson, and they can walk you through the development program.
Good evening, City Council members. I'm Tony Rozek, Vice President with R.D. Olson Development, and we truly appreciate the opportunity to present our project to you this evening. I'd like to start with an introduction to our firm. R.D. Olson Development has over 15 years of hotel experience, including over 30 years of general contracting construction experience. We are very active in the market. We have opened 5 new hotels in the last 2 years, in addition to having 4 currently under construction. We're averaging 1 hotel starting construction or opening 1 quarter per year. We consider ourselves to be very healthy financially and also to be a very secure company. We've invested over $200 million in new build hospitality since 2010 and over invested in new build hotels since the year 2000. We've been honored from the hospitality industry with a Marriott Award for Developer of the Year in 2014. One key ingredient for our success is to design hotels that feel as though they're destinations, hotels that reflect the local community and local culture. And you'll see a bit of that flavor presented to you when our architect, DLR Group, walks through the evolution of our design for our proposed hotel. Artie Olson is very excited about the potential for this market. Overall, the outlook for Silicon Valley and for the San Carlos area is obviously strong. We believe that this strength will continue for the foreseeable future, and we absolutely believe that the time and place is right for a upscale, select service, extended stay type of hotel for your city. To satisfy an unmet need in the current market, we are proposing an upscale, select service, extended stay type of hotel. One of the key features to an extended stay hotel is the incorporation of kitchens as an amenity for the guests. Our target guest profile, as you can see on our right, is an individual that's typically in his or her mid-30s to 40s, and this is based on our current hotels that are in operation, has an average income of approximately $130,000, well-educated, married, and is seeking a hotel in which they can stay on average 13 nights per stay. Now I'd like to transition into examples of our quality of hospitality development. One project, which is an independent brand, will be located in the city of Huntington Beach. Paseo Hotel and Spa will be 250 rooms, will incorporate a spa, have approximately 20,000 square feet of meeting facilities, and as you can see from the colors, from the forms and shapes on the exterior, the concept of the hotel was the wave, and a very appropriate theme for Huntington Beach. On the lower portion of the slide is Aliso Viejo Renaissance Club Sport, a hotel that we opened in 2008 with a great deal of success, even though times started to get rough at the beginning of the recession. Its theme, as you can see from very bright and playful colors, is one of an athletic and active living hotel. We also have a 70,000 square foot health club attached to this hotel, thus the athletic theme. A recent hotel opening is our Burbank Spring Hill Suites. Its target market was the Burbank TV industry. And I think it'll be obvious from the artwork that's installed here that we've catered to their aesthetics. A project that was developed in a team effort and in conjunction with the city in a similar process as we are with the city of San Carlos is our Tustin Hotels. Very proud to have DLR Group and Fusco on our team. And at this point, I'd like to transition to Jeremy Grant, who's our lead designer on the project, and he can walk you through the details of the architecture. But I'd just like to add that our civil engineer, our parking consultant, our arborist, and our environmental engineer will also be available for questions and answers.
All right. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, council members and Mr. Mayor, for hearing our presentation tonight. I'd like to introduce myself as Jeremy Grant. I'm the lead hospitality designer here in California for DLR Group. DLR Group was established in 1966. It is an engineering and architecture firm. Our expertise centers around hotels, education, civic, and sports design, among other things. Part of our motto is elevate the human experience through design. And you can see in this slide here, we have met with many of the stakeholders here in the city of San Carlos. 3 neighborhood presentations, multiple design iterations submitted to city planning, and 2 planning commission hearings, which the last of which we received approval. We really strive to we've strived to learn about the city of San Carlos and present a design that is unique and specialized to the city and culture here. As Al pointed out, you can see in the site aerial here the location of the site along Industrial Road and East San Carlos Avenue. On the lower portion, you can see the existing one-story industrial warehouse buildings. There is also, on the slide to the right, on the bottom, you can see the intersection there, and to the left is residential homes. Here we have the 204-room Landmark Hotel. It's positioned as a gateway to the city of San Carlos. It is a 4-story, 149,000 square foot hotel situated on a 3.9 acre property. It's highly visible from the 101 freeway on the east side here of San Carlos. Similar sized hotels and office developments you can see in the background you can see the area is experiencing new development. So we are matching in size and mass in the outlying areas. Here you can see in this slide the view from the intersection across the street from the Landmark Hotel. We work very closely with the community. Their concerns about traffic, pedestrian safety, and the East Side Connect plan. We've worked those into our design, and we've created a signalized crosswalk, some enhancement to the sidewalk and to the street for that crosswalk. We've also provided a landscape enhanced walking path around our project. You can completely walk around our project along a sidewalk and experience the native plantings and the unique architecture we're providing. There is also going to be a provision for a multi-use trail connection at the very end of East San Carlos, at the end of our property. Here's a closer look at the massing of the building, and this is a direct result of working with city planning and the community. There was concerns about the project siting, the architectural and landscape design. So we've addressed that by stepping down the building and stepping back from the adjacent single-family homes. There's a 10-foot setback along Industrial Road. We are providing a 54-foot setback on the ground floor and second floor. We are providing an additional, you could say, 17 feet of a total of 71-foot setback on the third and fourth floors. This is to reduce the visual impact to the building. I had mentioned the size of the hotel. 2.0 FAR is allowed. Our total hotel is planned at 0.89 FAR, which is less than half of what is allowed. On this slide, you can see on the top was our original design iteration back in August of last year. Through working with the city planning and neighborhood, you can see, as I mentioned before, the increased setback from the street on the upper floors and on the ground floors. This is another example how you can see the height and volume have been stepped back from a year ago, and we've improved the architectural design to formally address the street frontage along Industrial Road. Along with the architecture, we have designed a landscape that screens and buffers the hotel from the neighboring residents. On our property, on the upper portion of the slide, We have proposed a 4 to 6 foot shrubs and plantings, low plantings, to shield the view of the cars as they are parked in front of the building. We've also provided one additional tree according to the standards of the city. So there's one additional tree. They're very tall trees that will grow from planting to about 50 to 60 foot height at maturity. It is intended to soften the view of the architecture and mitigate some of the noise. There is a landscape buffer on the lower portion of your screen, which is off-site. It's not part of our property. It's public property. There are a few trees there, a few dead shrubs, and no irrigation. So we're going to go in and put some irrigation and then extra trees and shrubs to provide yet another layer of screening and buffering for the residents. The overall landscape plan comprises of a mix of California native and drought-tolerant trees and shrubs. Some of those trees are coastal redwoods, coastal California laurel, oaks, cypress trees, crepe myrtle, and other additional trees. The shrub planting consists of some local Pacific Coast iris, deer grass, juniper, jasmine, and purple lantana. These plantings have been closely reviewed and designed in conjunction with city planning. All the proposed plantings are local, drought resistant, and they're going to be drip irrigated. The project exceeds the requirements, the city requirements of 15% site area at a 21% landscape area. Here you can see in this slide the site and the ground floor of the hotel is showing a mix of guest rooms, the public lobby, check-in, a complimentary breakfast dining area that flows into an outdoor patio, a pool patio where you can eat and you can lounge. There's a small 1,500 square foot meeting area that can be used for the guests primarily. 1,000 square foot fitness area looks out onto the pool. Fitness areas are becoming very important in these extended stays. You can also wash your laundry while you stay here. And as Tony mentioned before, there's kitchens in every room. So there's a small market you can buy food to cook in your room. Next slide will be the typical guest room floors. On the lower portion of the side, you can see in comparison the second floor to the third and fourth. We're stepping back. We've reduced the room count in order to do this. The room mix is, it's a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms, studios, and suites. It's primarily king studio. That's 1 bed, primarily 1 person, the business traveler. This slide is very important as it shows the progress of design from the beginning of our workings with planning to the end. We have removed the signage facing the residents per their request. We've enhanced the ground floor with the ground floor elevation with stone system. And you can see we've developed a contemporary craftsman style in working with a third-party architect consultant recommended by the city. We've gone through very many iterations and enhanced the architectural detail with wood balconies, contemporary craftsman details, and to bring it all together is the dense landscaping. Another point that was made by planning and their architect was the style and proportion and the hierarchy of architectural design. And we feel that this is a very composed building. It is a tripart system. You can see the primary facade at the bottom with the sign, with the the balcony, the wood balcony with the wood detail, the deep overhangs. Very in keeping with the craftsman style. The materials and finishes are a collaborative design. It's a mix of stone cladding, slat wall system, a deep parapet cornice with brake metal, painted wood, trellis systems. Together it becomes a welcoming, modern, upscale impression unique to the San Carlos area. Another concern was the height and the variation in height and the parapet. You can see in the above slide it's a little bit less detailed and ornate. We've also had some more stepping back in and out of the wall facade, so there's a little bit more detail there. The height of the project has been reduced down to 42 feet at the roof plane and 45 feet at the rooftop mechanical parapet. The tallest tower elements are 50 foot, and they all function as mechanical screens, so you will not be seeing any equipment from the street. The hotel signage has also been allocated, as I said, from the San Carlos, from the Industrial Road facade, and it's facing the freeway and East San Carlos Avenue to minimize the impact of the signage to any of the outlying residents. Thanks for hearing our presentation tonight. I guess we'll conclude if you have any questions.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Good evening, Lisa Costa-Sanders, Principal Planner. Just run through the entitlements for you pretty quickly. There's 2 action items before the City Council this evening. First is certify the environmental impact report and adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting plan. And the second is to approve the disposition and development agreement. The Planning Commission heard the item at 2 separate meetings, and they did take final action by approving the design review certificate, the conditional use permit, the grading and dirt haul permit, the transportation demand management program, and they also found that the disposition of the property is consistent with the general plan. Some key environmental issues that were raised at the Planning Commission were relating to toxics. As you know, there was extensive discussion at the Planning Commission meeting with the existing contamination on site, and we've already started that remediation process to clean up the site. A resident requested the testing of PCB on the site, and although not required by County Environmental Health, that testing was completed and no PCBs were found on the site. The developer will assume site remediation upon purchase of the property going forward. Another topic was traffic. The grading and dirt haul route is restricted to East Holly Street only, so from Industrial East on Holly out to 101, there will be no westbound Holly traffic for the grading and dirt haul. And then further, the hotel shuttles were restricted in the conditional use permit, restricting them to Holly Street or Britton Avenue and prohibiting them from utilizing East San Carlos Avenue. There was also some concern about parking. There is data from several parking studies that found the 0.8 parking space per hotel room to be a sufficient ratio, and the Planning Commission agreed with that determination. We have 2 consultants here this evening that could answer any questions you have relating to parking. And then the Commission also imposed a condition that indicated no construction parking would be permitted in the neighborhood. We do have 2 consultants here this evening, one representing the city, one representing the developer, to answer any questions you have on toxics, as well as staff from County Environmental Health, and then also the traffic engineer working on the EIR, the traffic studies here this evening. So for the environmental impact report, the Planning Commission does recommend City Council certify the EIR. A scoping meeting was held in December. The draft EIR was circulated for public review starting in February this year. And the EIR evaluated all the potential impacts of the project. With the implementation of the mitigation measures, all the potential significant impacts are considered less than significant with the implementation of the mitigation measures. The mitigation monitoring and reporting plan, which you have before you as well, implements the mitigation measures that are identified in the EIR. And those include best management practices during construction for dust control, vehicle emissions, noise, stormwater measure, as well as the hazardous material mitigation. Also, to implement the recommendations contained within the geotechnical report, require the developer prepare an acoustical study, and that's really to mitigate the interior noise given the proximity to Highway 101. And then finally, to raise the building pad out of the floodplain. Jim Simon will review the disposition and development agreement.
Okay. Jim Simon with RSG. This obviously culminates a great deal of effort by the council and staff and everybody to get us to this point. And the disposition and development agreement is really the codification of where we are at this stage in the process. It provides for the sale of the property from the city to the developer. It also provides for the demolition, remediation, the assumption of remediation of duties, and development of the property. It includes a scope of development that outlines the general parameters of what type of development would be allowed on the property. And finally, it provides a subsidy to the developer, which we'll talk about momentarily. First, to the primary deal points. The purchase price of the property is $13.69 million, which is identical to the price paid by the city in 2014. As you know, this was assembled over a period of a few months from March to June of last year. The city paid that amount of money, and they agreed to sell the property to the developer at that price. The closing date for the transaction would be upon issuance of the grading permits, and that will be on or before the 25th of this year. Of November of this year. We'll be actually expecting to open escrow within 3 days of approval of the DDA. The deposit itself, there's a deposit that's already included within the MOU that was executed by the city and the developer in July of 2014. That will continue to carry forward and be credited towards the costs of the property, as well as another $100,000 for additional deposit that be made. As I mentioned, the project it has a scope of development which calls for at least 200-room upper mid-scale nationally branded hotel. You saw tonight that it would be a 204-room that's currently in the works. And there is a requirement that's been imposed in the DDA that the project be constructed at prevailing wage. And the developer would be assuming responsibility for the ongoing remediation. As you all recall, during the course of the city's acquisition, it was a case was reopened on the site which had to do with some prior contamination of the groundwater. That treatment has been ongoing for the past year or so, and the developer will be assuming that responsibility for the ongoing remediation to wrap up that work. The city has some responsibilities itself in the DDA in addition to selling the property. That is including the relocation of the electrical transformer on the site to accommodate the development program, installation of a traffic signal and crosswalk. This is at the intersection of Industrial and East San Carlos. And then finally, the undergrounding of utilities along East San Carlos from Industrial towards the 101. As I mentioned earlier, the project does require a subsidy in order to make this project work. The cost of doing prevailing wage construction adds about 30% to the overall cost of the project. That, as well as other factors, creates a gap in the financing. In other words, the cost of construction or exceed what the developer can afford to pay. So the city negotiated terms and conditions within the DDA for a subsidy included in your packet, which is a new requirement under state law that went into effect last year. It was an economic development subsidy report, which generally outlines the costs of the subsidy, which is $1.227 million. That would consist of selling the property at the original acquisition price as opposed to the appraised value that the city had for about $700,000 more, and improvements that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. The Economic Development Subsidy Report also outlines the various benefits that are conveyed with the project being completed. This was originally acquired by the city using a combination of lease financing as well as your SPAR funds. Those funds were intended to be used for projects that create an economic benefit and fulfill, an economic development objective of the city. In this case, $25 million of net new revenues to the city would be accruing in a present value over a 20-year period. 400 jobs, those include part-time, full-time, as well as temporary and construction jobs, as well as permanent jobs. There's a six-fold increase in the property value, which I think is certainly significant for an investment of $1.2 million. You're seeing the property go from a value of $14 million to $84 million with a much better, obviously, build quality than what you have out there today. The improvements to the site, remediation of what's currently in the ground today, relocation assistance to the affected tenants. Point out that as a city, you are uniquely obligated to provide relocation assistance and to assist the businesses. Most of these businesses were really all on month-to-month leases. If anyone else had bought this property, it would not have gotten that assistance. And then I mentioned earlier the prevailing wage construction requirement.
Thank you, Jim. Mayor and Council, that concludes our presentation. The Planning Commission is recommending that the City Council certify the environmental impact report and adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. The city staff is recommending that the City Council approve and authorize the city manager to sign the disposition and development agreement. As noted, we're available to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Al. And we do have some questions. Cameron, why don't we start with you?
For the excellent presentation by all. First question I wanted to ask was to Artie Olson. Can you talk a little bit about why an extended stay hotel makes sense? This is mostly my curiosity, but and why design a hotel with kitchens in each room when we've got so many great restaurants just a couple blocks away?
Sure. The first portion of your question regarding extended stay specifically, actually based on a market report prior to coming into any region or location, we do hire a hospitality marketing firm to analyze the local demographics and market, and it was the recommendation of that consultant that there is an unmet need here for an extended stay, an upscale extended stay type of room.
And when you say unmet need, you're not talking about San Carlos specifically, you're talking about the regional Silicon Valley hotel market, is that right?
Correct. The greater San Carlos area.
Okay. Okay.
And for your question regarding kitchens and
that was kind of a joke, but my guess is that the answer is that it's a standard amenity of an extended stay hotel. Is that right?
Yes, it is. It's an amenity that makes guests feel as though they're home.
Right.
The quality of our finishes, cabinetry, appliances feel like an upscale condominium. And they will absolutely be going out to restaurants. We found that the amenity is there to make them feel like home and less used, for lack of better words.
I won't tell. Okay, great. Thank you. The big four topics I think that we have been talking about leading up to this project, in my mind, were parking, traffic, height, and toxics. But I have to say they were so thoroughly addressed in the preparation materials and the presentation that I actually have no questions on those. I did want to ask a couple of small questions. There's a couple businesses directly to the north and to the south of this project, and this is going to be a massive construction project. What are you doing to make sure that they're not disrupted or severely inconvenienced by the construction?
We have had meetings and discussions with both sides of our property neighbors adjoining our parcel. And the neighbors to the north, I think that's a very clean-cut solution in that we'll have construction fencing that will prevent any access or any debris that may impact their parcel. On the south portion of our property, there is an existing access easement. It's for the benefit of 3 parcels, ours and 2 neighboring parcels. And we've had at least 2 meetings, and actually we'll have another during the course of this week to address timing. Obviously, we would like to fulfill their need to have continuous access during the course of construction. So we'll stage in continuous access, but to improve East San Carlos Road, there would be certain portions that would have to be closed off for improvement of utilities and asphalt or striping.
And I'm happy to hear that you've met and that you have some contingencies planned. With the folks on the other side of East San Carlos, would you characterize those as productive conversations, or are there any conflicts or open issues at the moment?
Oh, no, it's been very productive.
Okay, great. We've had a sort of perennial topic recently in San Carlos about shuttles, and I wanted to know and I don't know if you know this, is it planned that the hotel would have a shuttle that would take people downtown or otherwise move guests around the city?
The hotel will absolutely have a shuttle, as do all of our hotels. And simple answer being that the shuttle is primarily meant for taking guests to and from major transportation hubs, whether it be the airport or the train station. Train station being right across the street from downtown. So to answer your question, yes, shuttle service will be allowed downtown because it's actually just across the street from the train station.
Sure, absolutely. And so then I guess for Al, have you figured that additional shuttle demand into kind of the thinking, given that we've just limited the shuttles and picking up and dropping off at the train station?
Yes, and the intent is to allow these guys to use the Samtrans shuttle drop-off and pickup area, so they would be doing that. So yeah, we have taken that into consideration. It's also, the shuttle is part of their transportation demand management program, which reduces traffic to the site, so it helps there as well.
So do we have capacity in the Samtrans spot?
To pick up and drop off, yes.
Okay, yeah. And Samtrans is all good with that and everything?
I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
May I interrupt just for a second? I want to be very clear on that point. So the pickup and drop off would be on the east on Old County?
It would not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it would actually, the Planning Commission took issue with that actually, and they didn't want more shuttles using that cutout that we recently put in as part of Eastside Connect. So they required the developer to go to the other side, go down Britain and come around and go into the station area, the transit station.
Good, thank you.
Great, thank you for clarifying that, Mark. Happy to hear that. And then last question for Al. So I know in the early days when we were looking at acquiring property, there had been a thought of acquiring all 5 properties, and we ended up acquiring 3, and we're building the hotel. Do you see additional economic development opportunities for the 2 parcels that we didn't acquire? And if so, can you provide some thinking there, if appropriate?
I absolutely do. They're phenomenal economic development parcels in terms of their location. They still are. The market is very strong. I've had discussions with Mike Singh, who runs the Bayshore Electric and is part owner of the property with his family. And they'd really like to stay in town. I think that Mr. Singh has considered doing something with that property and allowing other development to occur. Of course, it's up to them. They'd really like to be in San Carlos. I know that they've talked to a lot of different development groups, and they continue those conversations now. In terms of the Bakers Union site, which is right next door, we did make inquiries to them to see if we could purchase their property, and they weren't interested in talking to us when we tried. We met with them initially, we expressed interest, and they seemed open when they first bought the property. So it remains to be seen what happens with that particular site.
Okay, great. That's all my questions. Thank you.
All right. And Cameron, maybe they can put flyers for Lucky in the room so that people will go down and patronize Lucky's. Mark. Or Bianchini's.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not exactly sure who individually these questions to be addressed at, so I'm just going to throw them out there, and whoever wants to can leap forward. First question actually is something that came up related to the EIR and the additional testing that was done, and I wanted to ask probably of the county. One of our residents who had some concern about this whole issue had done some inquiries at the county level and came back and told me that he was rather surprised to learn, or he was told, that the county only has records going back for the sites in terms of what businesses were on there and what potential pollutants were there for a limited period of time, because after a certain number of years the records are destroyed, which I thought was rather odd, and I just wanted to find out whether or not that is in fact correct or whether there was some misunderstanding that went on.
Good evening. My name is Greg Smith. I supervise the water protection and land use programs for County Environmental Health, and the resident was misinformed. Any land use records and any remediation records we keep forever.
I'm glad to hear that, because it didn't make sense to me that going to all the trouble of getting them in the first place that we would ever let them go.
No. And for this particular site, I believe they were asking about the former Shell station that was on one of the 3 corners that had gas stations on them or may still have. And I looked at those records, and we have the initial records going back to 1984 when it was first discovered as a leaking fuel tank site.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate it. Next question was sparked by something that we had in the consent agenda tonight. Al, maybe this is for you. When we're evaluating projects like this, do we consider risks associated with sea level rise? Or, whoever.
I guess Lisa might be able to answer that question.
Thank you, Lisa.
This property is located within the floodplain, and so they are required to bring it out of the flood zone. Sea level rise specifically wasn't looked at with this property because you have quite a few properties between it. And so I think it would be addressed kind of closer to the Bay Area, the Bay lands, with a more regional solution. You have Highway 101 there as well. But they will be taking it out of the floodplain, so they will be raising the site.
Okay, thank you. I may, Jeff, just as a note, I may want to spend some time with staff just to kind of understand how that interaction works. Next question has to do with I think of it as flagging, basically the company that's going over the long run be the flag on the hotel and operate it. What's the process and sort of the parameters under which that organization is selected? I mean, is it known today to R.D. Olson who it's going to be and that arrangement's already been made, or is it still to be done, or what?
Hello, honorable council members. I'm Dustin Schmidt, Vice President of Real Estate for R.D. Olson Development. We go through a pretty extensive process to figure out who will ultimately be the operator of the hotel. We're an owner of multiple hotels, so, we want to continue the, strong performance across our, entire portfolio of developed and owned hotels. And it's a bit of an RFP process that we run internally, and we get feedback. We look at the staffing models, we look at the different solutions, and we just make a selection. So it'll be a nationally branded extended stay hotel. It's a highly sought after product type and great for business and leisure travelers alike. And so something we take very, very seriously. And the operator of the hotel is an extremely important decision for us. It's a real estate development, but it's a business where the leases end every day. It's a street corner business, and we take it very seriously. So it's a process we're all involved in as a team, and the owner of our company is as well.
I'm glad to hear that, because I just wanted to understand more about it, because this is all kind of new to me, and I figured our interests are probably aligned here. You know, we don't necessarily want to see Mark Olbert, newly minted hotel company, being given the flag operation. It sounds like I wouldn't qualify, not that I plan on applying. Okay, good. Thank you. I appreciate that. There was a discussion that took place, may have been during the Q&A with Cameron, where there was some discussion about checking in with adjacent properties about issues during construction. Is there a plan to stay in contact with the East Side community, which admittedly is across the street, but also may be concerned about construction issues?
Absolutely. And we encourage interaction with the community groups even after opening. We'd absolutely like to be a good neighbor, and vice versa.
Okay, good. Because I think that will go a long way to assuaging concerns that you may have even heard one speaker tonight mention that there's a lot of development going on the East Side. So to the extent that every developer can sort of pitch in and try and make things better, that will help out a lot for everybody. Thank you. Last question is the most technical one for me tonight, and it has to do with a clause in the DDA, and it's the one 8.1.5, hotel operations prevailing wage. And I think I understand it correctly. The question I have that I'm hoping somebody can answer from the R.D. Olson side is, can you give me a little insight into what the, for lack of a better term, the intent of having that language in there is? Because when I read it, and I'd be happy to explain this after you respond, there's a part of me when I read it, it's almost like I'm not even sure why it's there. But I'd like to get some insight on that.
Dustin Schmidt again from R.D. Olson Development. There's two parts to that. One part is the agreement that we've had from the very beginning, which is all prevailing wages for the development of the hotel. There's the second part, which we just wanted to clarify more than anything, was, you know, that we would not be required to operate the hotel with prevailing wage or union. We're taking on a huge financial responsibility at the city's request to build with prevailing wage, and so that was the purpose, was just to clarify that we can underwrite and business plan for what the deal is that we've all agreed on, and rely on that, get financing for it. I mean, we're already, you know, out there. As soon as we have our approvals, it's going to be, you know, we're talking to banks, we're talking to our partners, and everybody needs to understand the full scope of what's going on. As we go out to RFP with our operators as well, that is a huge factor also.
Why would that be a factor with operators? Because the DDA, and maybe I'm misunderstanding the way the DDA works, the DDA, as I understand it, is between the city and R.D. Olson.
Correct.
And so it doesn't actually contemplate, we don't even know who the operator is at this point. I mean, you may have your thoughts, you know, from the RFP process. So nothing that's in here would be binding, I don't think, on the operator, because that would be between you and the operator, not between us and anybody. We're gone by that point.
Yeah, I mean, the agreement it's definitely binding. I mean, we're going to be required to develop with prevailing wage, and as far as any kind of prevailing wage or union on the operations side, you know, it really affects the performance of the hotel, how the hotel's staffed. I mean, it's a huge component. So that's something that we just, you know, we wanted clarified in the document. We wanted to make sure that, you know, the guidelines are clear in the approval. Yeah, you're right. We don't send the DDA to the operators and have them follow it, but it's our rule book, right? I mean, it's our agreement, and we have to follow it just like a purchase and sale agreement, and all the rules and guidelines that go with that. So it was in there to clarify what was going to be required and what was not going to be required.
I guess what I'm still having a little difficulty with is that, unless I'm misunderstanding it, it would only be in effect basically for the period of time, the agreement for the period of time that you are developing the hotel, and perhaps initially if you are the initial operator before you hand it off to somebody else. At that point, this agreement sort of goes away.
Yes, sir. Once we have our certificate of occupancy and we've satisfied the terms of the DDA,
right?
We've reached compliance at that point.
Let me move on rather than beat the issue to death there, because there's another aspect to it I want to understand. In your responses, Dustin, you've been focusing a lot on the prevailing wage component, and I get that. I understand that's whatever my personal feelings about it may be, it was a conscious decision to not require a prevailing wage during the operation phase, but to do it during construction. I guess where I'm a little less clear is why does 8.1.5 also include language saying that there can't be, card check neutrality or other prevailing wage or union agreement. Actually, let me leave the union agreement out. It can't be card check neutrality or other prevailing wage agreements. That's the part where I'm not quite sure. I understand the prevailing wage thing. I don't understand where the rest of this stuff got dragged in from and what the need for that is.
Well, so on the operations side, those are very critical things. Basically a card check neutrality agreement is an agreement that binds us and basically would allow active unionization of the hotel, where we have to stand down. We do not have any right to just operate the hotel, keep our employees happy, be competitive. What it definitely does not do is preclude folks down the road from unionizing. They can absolutely, if the employees are not satisfied, if we're not paying the wage, we're not paying the benefits, or our operators not rather, then that right is absolutely in effect. But what we wanted to make clear in the agreement was that we would not be required right out of the gate to allow active unionization of our property, which is what card check neutrality does. It basically ties your hands as the owner and developer. We're just asking in exchange for building the project with prevailing wage for the right to open our hotel and operate it with our selected operator on our own in a fair market condition and be competitive with our staff and our hotel workers.
And so then, sort of last question here, the shall not be required to execute a union agreement for the management and operations of the project. How does that relate? How do I interpret that, given your last comment about, and you're correct, under national labor law, the workers have the right opportunity and right to organize if that's what they wish to do. Since they have that right, what does that clause mean in here?
Well, we just don't want to be forced to sign a union agreement, by condition of the project. So if
by condition of the project, by
condition of the approval of the project. So all we're asking for is, the ability to open the hotel, non-union, be competitive. If the staff is not happy, then that right is still there, and there would be a chance to unionize down the road. Another aspect is this is not a union environment. So as an owner, we would suddenly be at a total disadvantage because no other hotel in this region is a union-operated hotel. You've got San Francisco, you've definitely got some in San Jose. Those are more typical union environments, and so that's one aspect. And going into the project, the prevailing wage right out of the gate was something we were comfortable with. We could carry the extra cost of that requirement, the union operation is a whole other requirement. Again, all we're asking for is to not be required to operate union or pay the prevailing wage. It's going to be market. We have to be competitive with wages and benefits. The employees will absolutely have the ability for upward mobility. They can come in as a housekeeper, they can come in as a night clerk and work their way up to a GM at some point. It's a great program, and the national operators are very good at what they do.
Okay. Last question, promise you. It just occurred to me as you were talking. Just roughly off the top of your head, of the properties that you've built and managed and whatnot, what proportion of them are unionized? Or where there's at least some? None?
None are union.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions. It appears that if we approve this evening, Al had said that the construction period was about 24 months. So that would be the spring of, I'm guessing you wouldn't start until the spring of 16 to start. So it would be the spring of 18 when it would open approximately. Is that what we're looking at? Or earlier?
I believe construction start was shown on one of the slides in November of 2015.
So you're actually going to start to demolish in November?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we hope to start demolition in November. We're anticipating with some rain, anticipated rain this year.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, you can see the signs, and
So
let's hope it's not.
anywhere from November through the spring, in other words, of either November 17 through spring of 18, approximately,
Yes.
that 4 or 5 month period. Okay. And the other question I had was, there's been a lot of discussion in the Bay Area recently, unfortunately, because of a huge accident that happened in Berkeley relative to balconies. And I heard the word balcony thrown around. I think the gentleman from the design firm. Are those balconies going to be able to people step on them, or are they just for artistic?
No, they're Juliet-type balconies. The railings will be tied to the exterior walls.
No, I guess my question is, can you step on the balcony or cannot? No. Okay, so that's fine. Thank you. Just thought I'd ask the question, because if so, then we got to get our guys going 1,000 miles more. So thanks.
You can't fall over the railing, though.
You can't. You'll be able to step out. So you're not gonna be able to...
Matt, you had some questions?
Yeah. The first one, I guess, is for R.D. Olson, someone from R.D. Olson. You'd mentioned similar development in another city in terms of how it was processed. Can you go
That's
deeper into that?
It's a collaborative process with a DDA in the city of Tustin.
So it was a similar deal where the city bought the land?
Correct.
Okay. All right. That was just one question. And then I think this would be for Al. The architect had shown the renderings, and I was comparing that, and I'm just going by memory, but to our city design guidelines, and which require windows to have profile and some depth to them, so that you get shadow lines and so forth. And I'm not necessarily seeing that in the renderings.
I'll have the architect speak to that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, sure. By the way, I like the IMPay glasses.
Thank you. So the way the windows and the wall framing around those windows are, there'll be a minimum of 4-inch setback of the window. The window frame from the exterior wall, and then probably a half-inch to 1.5 inches setback from the frame face to the glazing.
Okay. And Al, so that would satisfy our design guidelines? Yeah, okay, all right. And then I think it was Lisa that was talking about the PCB testing, is that right? Yeah. So my first question on this is a little bit of a curiosity, because I would like some comparison to an earlier issue that we had on the agenda, or at least some public comment about an earlier issue, and that is the cost of the PCB testing versus how many borings were done. Do we know that?
You actually contracted for that work? Yeah, to expedite the work, we actually had R.D. Olson use their firm to do so, and then we had our consultant take a look at the work.
Okay.
Hi, Frank Poss with PSI. What we did is we collected 6 soil samples across the property. That is beyond the sampling that was done in 1995 that did not find any PCBs. We took samples in the shallow subsurface right below the base, which is the most likely place that you would find PCBs, and we had non-detect for every one of the samples.
And what was the price tag on that?
It was between $3,000 and $5,000.
That's, wow, okay.
There was no permitting required, and it was a simple process. No drill rig.
Oh, okay. So it really doesn't I don't know if you heard earlier, but somebody was talking about the creek, and that's why I'm asking is to
It's a
look at what
lot
we have
simpler
budgeted.
process.
And say,
It's a lot simpler process for what we did as compared to trying to take samples in the creeks, especially if you're going to be going at any depth.
Right. Okay. And at $3,000 to $5,000, I was going to ask who paid for it, but it's sort of a moot point. $3,000 to $5,000. Huh? Yeah. And then I had a question for on noise mitigation that was mentioned. I think you had mentioned that in the who mentioned noise mitigation in the EIR? Was that Lisa? Okay. Sorry. Sorry to accuse you. You can stay seated.
The EIR evaluated that they'd need to prepare an acoustical study and install the appropriate noise insulation measures, and that's typically, the high-end window framing as well as air conditioning, interior.
And so that was you said that was for Highway 101 traffic.
The noise associated with the freeway traffic. It may have also been airport noise.
That's what you
Steve Nowak, our EI consultant, can respond to. Come on up.
Come on up if you don't mind. Get some exercise.
Got to have you on record. And you're on TV too.
Steve Nowak with PlaceWorks. And the idea is it's all the ambient noise. It's not just specifically 101. It's the total ambient noise in the area exceeding the thresholds that would require the study.
Good, because I know, even from our East Side residents, we get complaints about, on the weekends particularly, there's training for helicopter pilots. And sometimes you get a lot of activity and, probably there's no way to mitigate that 100%, but, there it is. So the airport does create some noise, kind of almost single event, like, on weekends, but it's long-term on the weekends and that kind of thing. So I'm glad to hear that it is included. Those are all my questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt. I just had a couple. Might be for Jay or Al on traffic. Just a couple on traffic. The traffic study said that the morning traffic would be slightly less. Can you just enlighten us on how that conclusion was arrived at?
I'd like to ask Hexagon to come up. They did the study, and At can answer those questions.
All right, thank you.
Ad van der Hout, Hexagon Transportation Consultants. We did the traffic analysis for this. The way this works is the land uses that will be demolished as part of the new construction of this project generate a certain amount of traffic. And we counted that traffic associated with those developments. And as a result, the traffic in the morning decreases because there's less traffic coming in and out compared to hotel traffic. So that's...
Okay, so it's basically existing use versus future use. Okay. The other thing, I don't know if you're the one to answer this. There was a question, I got an email on the effect of traffic or the effect on traffic during construction. Is there any impact either way on it?
What we've told that the amount of traffic, at least associated with the construction, is less than the traffic that will be generated by the project itself. So in terms of congestion levels and things like that, there should not be any impacts on that.
Okay. And then the other thing I had, and again, I don't know if you're the right person, I understand the parking is 0.8 spaces per room, and I understand that also, does that also include employee parking as well? So with all the guests and all the employees, it's really 0.8 of all the rooms, I guess, right? Okay, so 0.8 of a space. And can you tell me why that is? I mean, you would think that 200 rooms, 200 guests, 200 cars.
Well, I can certainly answer that.
Go ahead. Whoever wants it.
There are several sources to determine the parking ratio, the parking need for a hotel like this. The most common source is ITE, which is basically the Bible for traffic engineering. That document says that the average rate is about 0.66, I believe, per room, so which is less than the 0.8. In addition to that, what the applicant has asked for from another consultant, and what my experience is too in doing surveys at hotels, is that we did survey the applicants traffic engineer did surveys, I believe, at 8 different hotels and summarized the results. And B, my company has done several surveys in Cupertino's, in Sunnyvale, because we get those questions all the time. And the empirical data shows that there's clearly, a 0.8 would clearly satisfy the parking need for a hotel like this. So most of the time, the rates are actually lower than that even. So.
And is that common for these kinds of developments?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions of staff or any of our guests? All right. In that case, this is a public hearing, and we do have a couple of speaker slips. The first one I have is it Matt Davidson? Did I get that right? Okay. Come on up, Matt.
Hi, so my wife and I live on McHugh. We're directly across the street from the hotel. There's actually one house separating us from the hotel development. And I appreciate some of the councilman's comments specifically regarding the neighbors and the noise to the guests who are going to be staying at the hotel. But there hasn't been as much focused on the people who are going to be living right around the hotel and have to live with it every day. My wife and I moved to San Carlos about a year ago because we really like the neighborhood and we like McHugh specifically because it's a fairly quiet street and we thought it'd be a great place to raise a family. And I should say that the hotel has actually done a great job, the developers and designers working with the community, and we appreciate that. However, constructing a project of this magnitude across the street from a residential area requires special considerations for the neighbors. And I appreciate that there's a median separating our neighborhood from the hotel, and they've proposed to do some landscaping to kind of buffer the residential area from the development. And I've asked the developers and the designers if they could start that landscaping process prior to demolition and construction of the hotel, because that's going to be a very noisy and disruptive process to the neighbors. And they've said that they are unable to do that, not to any of their fault, but due to potential disruption of nesting birds that may take residence in newly planted trees. So I'm taking them at their word that that actually is the case and hoping that the city council can make some sort of variance to allow them to actually landscape this median prior to demolition and construction. My wife and I are actually expecting our first child a month before that they begin demolition. And, our house will be very noisy over the next 2 years without a hotel being built. And this can be easily mitigated. I don't know exactly what it takes for the council to allow a variance to them to allow to begin landscaping prior to demolition, but I urge you to do whatever is necessary because I believe that residents and infants who are San Carlos residents deserve a little bit more than hypothetical nesting birds that may live in trees that are planted. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We also have Mark Leach.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. I didn't intend to speak, but my hackles got raised just a second or two ago. My name is Mark Leach, and I represent workers in this county. We spent a significant amount of my time in this city because, as many of you may know, and anybody who watches traffic on that street, the corner that we're talking about tonight, a lot of workers travel in and out, and a lot of construction workers. There are a lot of supply houses, there are construction shops, and I'm a trustee on a training center that's just 2 or 3 doors down on Industrial. So a lot of workers, a lot of union workers. There's a Delta Star transformer factory just up the road. There's a PG&E yard. This is a union town, so if I can introduce you to some of the folks if you're just arriving recently and haven't recognized that it is a labor-friendly town. I represent construction workers, so I want to say thank you for the prevailing wage requirement. Any construction worker that gets a job on that job site will be treated fairly and be able to work and live in the same town, which is huge. But as a labor council officer, I also represent other workers, the least of us. Folks that work in hotels, large numbers of women and minorities that work in hotels, and if you've heard the 78 cents on the dollar for what women earn in this country, I felt it was my job to get up here and say that card check is not what it was portrayed to be. A union job in a hotel is the best job that you'll get in a hotel. A non-union job in a hotel is not a good job. If we're looking out for all the residents and all the people in this community, especially the least of us, I would like to see a good union hotel in the future. If there's any way to line through some of the requirements that were put in the document that have restricting card check, labor law, as you pointed out, workers will always have that right in the future, but there are certain things that make it friendlier and easier to have the process go through. So anything we can do to make those agreements between San Carlos and the future operator of the hotel, I'd like to see those adjustments made.
Okay.
So once again, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. All right, I don't have any more speaker slips, but are there any other people here that would like to speak? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I did have one other question.
Yeah.
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Mike.
Before we...
Sorry, and Cameron knows too, so go for it.
Okay. Construction days of the week, are they, I think in San Carlos it's Monday through Saturday, is that correct? 8 a.m. to 5?
6. Yeah, it's till 6, and it's actually every day, including Sunday.
Including Sunday.
And
so that applies to this site as well?
It did. However, the Planning Commission took issue with that. And so what they put into the conditions is that they could not work on Sundays and holidays.
Okay.
And that was okay with the developer.
Great. Good to hear it, because I'm thinking of, this couple right here.
Yeah.
That'd be, so good.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add one thing with regard to the...
Mr. Olson wants to say something too. I'm sorry.
And if I may, with regard to the tree issue, from a mitigation monitoring standpoint, we talked about it with our EIR prepare, and staff and the EIR folks are okay with allowing for the construction or the installation of the trees across the street. So if the council wishes to make that as part of the mitigation monitoring program that you're approving or would certify this evening, you can do so.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you. All right. Did you want to also speak? Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to apologize to Matt if there was a misunderstanding regarding the conversation. I believe our architect was referencing a project that he's worked on in the area in which the timing of work on trees did have to be organized around this habitat period. But we'll absolutely work with you and try to install that median early. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Cameron?
So, sorry, just to clarify that last point, if we want to address the gentleman's concerns and install the landscaping early, is there any change needed to the resolution? No. Okay. All right.
Okay. I take it that means we'll take care of it. Okay.
And on that note, I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All right. We have move and second to close the public hearing. Yvette?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Olbert?
Yes.
Mayor Collins?
Yes. Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt Resolution 2015- 92, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos certifying the final environmental impact report and adopting the mitigation monitoring and reporting program for the Landmark Hotel project at 595 Industrial Road, 850 East San Carlos Avenue, and 810 East San Carlos Avenue, APN 046-090-290 and 046-090-210 and 046-090-220.
Second.
Okay. Are we voting on these separately, Greg? Okay. All right. Any other discussion?
Yes, sir.
I have 3 lights on, so.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Go ahead, Matt. I saw yours first.
Okay. So I'm in a conflict here because when I read this history that the staff provided us, of course, it talks about site was identified all the way back, I think, in the early 90s as a landmark site for a hotel. And the people from R.D. Olson even said, it's a great site, it's great location, San Carlos, and of course it makes sense to build a hotel here. But we had that out on the market, you might say, by zoning it and calling it a landmark site for all those years, 25 years, and no developer stepped forward and took it on. It took the city buying the property and doing the heavy lifting of paving the way, you might say, putting up our money, not getting any interest for it during that time period in order for this to happen. And to me, that puts us in a conflict of interest, because now we're landowners, but we're also conducting the process of the EIR, of the Planning Commission, all the meetings, everything. And of course, what's our Planning Commission going to do? They know our money, our millions of dollars, is on the line. So they're going to vote for the project, of course. So is the council. Not this council member, because I just don't like the process. I like R.D. Olson. I used to have a job years and years and years ago where I dealt with your company, and I know you're an upstanding citizen in the construction and development market. I like your project. I like everything about this. I just can't bring myself to oppose my own values and principles on how government ought to work, and we should never have stepped in and done this. This should have been the developer buying the properties and bringing them all together, and then we would have been done our proper position as judge, you might say, of things, but not be an active participant the way that we are. I just don't agree with what we're doing here. So I have to vote no on these things, but I don't want you guys to think I don't like your project. I like it very much.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things, one of which sparked by Matt's last comments. I can certainly understand the sort of conflict he feels about his values and and still wanted to make sure that people understand he appreciates the developers and their projects. I don't share the opinion, obviously, that government has no role to sometimes make things happen. And in fact, it occurred to me this is obviously a much larger scale example than what San Carlos was doing, buying those properties that the hotel is going to be built on. But there wouldn't actually be much of the United States if Thomas Jefferson hadn't bought the Louisiana Purchase. He actually got quite a bit of flack for it at the time, because it was considered to have overstepped federal authority, and it turns out that wasn't true, because federal authority was rather loosely defined in those days, I guess. Anyway, I just mentioned that in passing, and I'm fine with what we did, and if the opportunity presents itself again, maybe we'll do it again. And that's because this is a project that, we call it a landmark hotel for a reason. This is a project that this community has wanted to have for decades. It's actually wanted to have it longer than I've been in San Carlos. A lot of people said it could never happen. They were right that it didn't happen for a long time. The stars aligned properly, the economy improved at the right time, land became available at the right time. And I think it's great that we're moving forward with this. I recognize that part of that is just that the hospitality industry is on the upswing right now. There's an enormous unmet demand for hotel space of this kind in the peninsula. There were people beating down the doors to work on this project. I'm glad that we're working with you guys, but I was actually surprised at how many people there actually were that were bidding aggressively on this. In fact, I think, Jeff, you told me that one of the runners-up is aggressively moving forward, trying to do something else in San Carlos. So all sorts of work going on in this part of town. But I do want to say that with the lengthy discussion I had with Dustin, the one element of this that kind of concerns me a little bit, I'm going to say this with a heavy heart. I'm going to vote for this, and it's all about the language in 8.1.5, because I actually feel like when I first read that, it's like, I never had any intention of ever supporting doing those things that we're being told we can't do in the contract and for the development period, and it just kind of it hit me the wrong way that we're even being asked to do that, because preserving people's rights to organize it's really important, at least to me. and I know that's not universally shared, but it's important to me. I'm satisfied after all the discussion, both here and that I had beforehand with our attorneys and staff members, that this is as such things go, it's relatively benign. But I will tell you point blank that I really wish that it wasn't in there, and if it was in there, I really wish it was formulated in a different way so it didn't really rub me the wrong way. So I'm going to support this. It's a great day for San Carlos. I just wish that we could have had something different than what we have in 8.1.5.
Thank you, Mark. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I said earlier, once in a while my colleague and I disagree. And as Mr. Olbert said, I believe this is a perfect example of public-private partnerships. I think it's a perfect example of the city being forward-thinking and having the opportunity to maybe do the heavy lifting, but being able to make it happen. Obviously, the economy of our area has really helped a lot with that too, whether we bought it or didn't buy it. But to assemble parcels these days, as I'm sure these gentlemen could attest to, more than one parcel, and the gentleman in real estate is nodding, and I know, is a very difficult thing, and we were able to do it. And by doing so, I think we've provided a situation where we're going to provide some jobs for people. We're going to provide long-term income for the city on the transit occupancy tax, and some other items along the way. So I think it's a good project. I think it's something that we're going to be proud of in the future. And relative to Mark's comments, I think everybody knows where I stand on labor, and it's an issue that I appreciate that the folks are doing prevailing wage. What happens in the future with the operator, I think that's going to be with the operator situation. I think that this county has always stood up for the working person, as Mr. Leach indicated, and what will happen. But I believe this is an opportunity for a number of people to have jobs and have the opportunity to do what they need to do. So I'm going to support both resolutions this evening.
Thank you, Bob. Cameron.
This is a huge win, and a lot of times people don't, and a lot of people in this community are not going to recognize it. They're going to see a big building go up, and they're not going to understand the impact that that's going to have to the community. They're also not going to recognize how much effort and creative thinking went into making this happen. I'm excited to see Mark in the audience, and I want to call out Mark, Jim, Lisa, Al, Jeff. This is huge. I mean, if you go back a few years, this was a simple this was a sort of a vague hypothetical concept at a time when the governor was dismantling our only main tool for economic development in the state of California. We lost redevelopment. We lost all of our resources. A lot of cities around California decided that they should just sue the government and sulk. And we said, well, we've got a very small pot of money. Let's leverage that into a much bigger pot of money, and let's be really creative and try and make something happen. And we did it. And you're going to look at this building, and it looks beautiful, and you're going to see a hotel. But really, to me, what it is it's that extra $1 million a year that's coming in the budget, which is another playground, another soccer field, better public safety, and on and on and on, filling potholes, et cetera. And that's the thing that people don't connect. And it's testament to all you guys. I'm grateful to be able to work with people who have that vision and have the tenacity to try to make these things happen. Well done. So, thanks.
Thanks, Cameron. Great comments. I just have a couple here. First, some shout outs. Jeff, just great vision on this. Al, incredible negotiator and dogged pursuit of this. And Lisa, depth of knowledge and all the stuff you do, all the work you did on this. I'm very, very impressed and thankful. And also to Artie Olson, putting together a pretty good project. I mean, I think it's a very good project. But also for working with our East Side residents. You may not know this, Mark and I sat on as you know, we sat on the selection committee for choosing developers. And one of the things I was looking for for lack of a better term, was bedside manner. I was trying to envision the people making the presentation sitting down with the representatives of the neighborhoods nearby and how they would be, or you would be received by them. That was very important to me. It was almost as important as, can you do the project and what are the numbers and can we do it? So thank you very much for that engagement. It's very important in this community that we recognize the concerns of all of our citizens, that we answer those concerns, that we do something about them. But just one thing I thought of in this process, we were talking about public-private partnerships, and this country was built on those. The Transcontinental Railroad is a great example. The federal government making all that land available, and we had some rapacious railroad men who actually built the railroad, but it would never would have gotten built without that cooperation. And I just think about the long-term effect of this. This took some zoning changes. It took a lot of work, but the long-term revenue to the city is going to benefit every resident here. It goes to help things like fixing our roads and upgrading our parks and the lighting and everything. So all around, like Cameron says, it's a huge win. So with that, I think we have, unless anybody has anything else to say, I think we are ready for a vote. Yvette, go for it.
Councilmember Gracilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Olbert?
Yes.
Mayor Collins?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt Resolution 2015-93,
93.
a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos approving and authorizing the city manager to execute the disposition and development agreement between the City of San Carlos and Olson Real Estate Group Incorporated for the Landmark Hotel project at 595 Industrial Road, 850 East San Carlos Avenue, and 810 East San Carlos Avenue.
Second.
Okay. No more discussion. Yvette, please call the roll.
Councilmember Gracilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Olbert?
Yes.
Mayor Collins?
Yes. Okay. Moving on to... Thank you very much. New business. Consideration of a resolution adopting a memorandum of understanding between the City of San Carlos and the American Local 856 Freight Checkers, Clerical Employees and Helpers Union, International Brotherhood of Teamsters, IBT, unit for the period September 1st, 2015 through August 31st, 2017. Rebecca.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Rebecca Mendenhall, Administrative Services Director. Before you tonight for consideration is a 2-year memorandum of understanding tentatively agreed to by the Teamsters unit. This group is comprised of 16 budgeted positions, including a mechanic, maintenance workers, and senior maintenance workers. The resolution before you includes a 3% increase in base pay for all members of the unit for both years of the contract. The fiscal impact of approving this contract totals $52,600, and this amount has already been factored into the budget, so no additional appropriations are required. A summary of the other key components are, this is a 2-year term through August 31st, 2017. It includes an increase in the alt medical pay benefit to match that of the employee-only health benefit contribution. It's an increase in the dental plan reimbursement from $1,500 to $2,000 annually. It included an option to add dependents to vision care coverage at employee expense. We restored the vacation payout for those who have accrued above the cap. And we've eliminated the job incurred disability leave for any new employees. All employees are still covered under workers' compensation law. And we made an agreement that for the term of this contract, the city will not lay off any member of the unit as a direct result of contracting out of duties. So with that, I'd like to extend my thanks to the Teamsters unit for working with us to come to this agreement. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca. Any questions for Rebecca? Matt?
Just one. So just a clarification, the health benefit, if a person chooses not to take health insurance through the city, and then what they're getting is what an individual would get from the city towards their health insurance costs on a monthly basis. Mm-hmm. And that's simply a return to a policy we had prior to going through budget cuts and the thing that Cameron was talking about earlier, where we went through the downturn in the economy and we were looking around for ways to save money. This is just a return to that policy.
It's a return to the same level
Yeah.
of benefit, yes.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Rebecca?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion. Move to adopt Resolution 2015-94,
94.
resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos, adopting a memorandum of understanding between the City of San Carlos and the American Local 856 Freight Checkers. What is that? American Local doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, American Local 856 Freight Checkers, Clerical Employees and Helpers Union, International Brotherhood of Teamsters, IBT, unit for the period September 1st, 2015 through August 31st, 2017.
Second. Beat you to it.
We have a motion and a second, and as a formality, I will ask if there's any public comment, and seeing no public to comment. Any other comments by council? All right, Yvette, please call the roll.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Olbert?
Yes.
Mayor Collins?
Yes, and we are adjourned.
Oh, Mr.
We
Mayor.
are not?
I just wanted to say, if I might, I'd like to thank Yvette for a wonderful first meeting. Look forward to many more. And I'm very impressed with how smoothly you stepped into the role.
Thank you.
Here, here.
Yeah. Thank you, Yvette. Okay, I think now we're adjourned.